open final of Edinburgh Cup 2023. Big congratulations to all the teams that have made it this far. My name is Alex. I'll be your chair for this round. My preferred pronouns are she or her. However, there's a very qualified panel judging you, so please refer to the panel as a whole using non-gendered language. If my panelists would like to introduce themselves from left to right.
My name is Pjotr. Well done, y'all, and best of luck.
Victor, no preferred pronouns, congrats and enjoy.
I'm Sachin, good luck for the round.
And then, good luck. Cool. Just a reminder to speakers that this is not a time for extra prep, it's a time for listening to people's pronouns. Opening government.
Alishba, first preference, and Olden, second, the order, please.
Thank you.
Speaking for Zainab, please.
Please.
Thank you, CG.
Sure, first preference, Irina, second,
Thank you, CO.
Rhea speaking first, she, her.
Harvey speaking second to you.
Wonderful. Just one last thing before we get started. I believe that there is a microphone on the little clear lectern thingy that you should clip onto yourself before you start speaking. If there are any problems with this, someone else will deal with it because I don't know. Cool. Rules are as they have been. I will have timekeeper up making a ding at 1, 6, 7, 7:15. At 7:15 we will stop writing. Please stop speaking. Cool. With all of that being said, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to start this debate. Oh, great.
First check if this mic works.
Of course.
Yeah, does it work fine? Okay, I tend to talk really loud, so I'm really sorry if it's too loud. Religion is a mechanism through which people access catharsis and community, a mechanism through which they access self-actualization and welfare, a mechanism through which they're able to determine which choices that they can make that ought best meet the preferences of the life that they choose to live by. A couple of things from opening government. Firstly, framing as to what this motion looks like and how it ought to be personified. Second, why you reduce religious violence. Third, why you have greater ability for change. And fourth, self-actualism and why your quality of life increases. Firstly, on the idea of framing and what these key features of monotheist religions look like and how we would construct this new religion. I think there's a couple of key features that all religions of the monotheistic descent have in common. Firstly, the conception of heaven and hell. That means people who do bad things go to hell, people who do good things go to heaven. Secondly, the concept of having a world of one true God. Thirdly, the concept of having prophets or messengers that bring about new foundations within religion. Fourth, the ability to have a scripture that people can consult in. Fifth, the ability to have things and religions evaluated. The ability to have preachers and priests. Sixth, to have some degree of spiritual activity, so praying, fasting, and things that you need to abide your life by in order to access the benefits of religion. And lastly, it has some type of virtues that is cemented on. Think of the 10 Commandments, think of the 5 pillars of Islam. First argument then, about why you reduce religious violence. I think this argument is quite self-intuitive. Notice that fighting in the status quo happened in religion because religions fought amongst each other. I think a common example that we use today is in Nigeria. There's massive religious battles that exist within the Christian and Muslim community that have killed thousands of people. There have been historical battles that have occurred that have insurrected violence against minority religious communities. Why is this important? Because I think religion has been an instigator of many things, like colonialism, like war, like death, like violence. Simply the fact that because other religions had incentives to compete to each other to get followers, because they had incentives to compete with each other to show the public that they have the superior ideology. Why doesn't this happen when compared? When you have one religious ideology that people subscribe to, you're less likely to have fighting about what the true way of life is. So you're unlikely to be imposing your idea and viewpoint on another party in a manner that insurrects a massive degree of violence. Why is this something that you should just care about why is this something you should just ultimately weigh highly in the debate? Notice then, I think violence and death is probably a really bad thing, but the people who suffered immense torture or who had to live their life in fear or who had to live their life in fear suffered significant pain. They weren't able to ever self-actualize in their life, and they had to see their friends and family members die. Crucially, to the extent that which this violence doesn't happen, given that as a prefers motion, this is an entirely new world, that's the extent to which we're able to ensure that many people don't die from violence, from pain. I think the opposition can come here and say, war kills people, there's scarcity of resources, and sectarianism exists. But that's not the point, because religious fighting between different religions has been a massive cause for violence. And to that extent, we're able to show that there's no violence, that there's less violence that happens on our side of the house, given that the extent and the impact of violence is so visceral for the average person. We think this is something that you should weigh highly. Let's say that opposition says that there could be sectarianism in different sects within religion that have different ideologies and impose violence. First, know that this violence is massively reduced in scale, specifically because other religions don't exist and don't have a monotheism and influence. Second, sectarianism is worse when other religions exist. Why is this the case? Because the way Islam can galvanize followers is that they point to the Christian church and say, look at all the sects they have. Look at Catholicism, look at Protestantarianism, and look at the fact that they are a divisive religion. That forces those sects to continue fighting and to continue fighting amongst each other to show the world that within Christianity, their sect is the most superior. This is the messaging I heard when growing up, right? But I think that to that extent, that type of messaging makes sectarianism worse. So even if it exists on our side, it's not going to be that bad. But lastly, I think sectarianism that would exist on our comparative would not be the violent and vicious one that exists today. I'm going to weigh up why people who operate the religion that exists on our side have incentives to listen to dissent. That leads to the second argument. Why do we have a greater ability for change? Because it's easier to reform a monolith religion. And why is this the case? A couple of different mechanisms. Firstly, it's easier to criticize a religion from the inside. Know that everyone believes in this religion. The reason that is important is you understand the fundamental ways in which you don't like the religion, or like the specific elements it subscribes to. That means you have a better understanding on the ways it can be reformed rather than external backlash. But also means it can put internal pressure on deities, on various figures that exist within the religion to reform the religion so it's more conducive to their followers. The reason that these deities want to listen to you is insofar as they care about people accessing religion. They don't want people to be dissatisfied, and they no longer have a problem with whether they will or will not retain followers. They're more likely to be amenable to the request of the average person, which doesn't happen in the status quo. Second, religions are less protectionist, and this is a very important concept, because the reasons religion operate the way they do in the status quo, where they generate backlash or they become very protectionist and conservative, is because they always feel like they're under attack from everyone in the status quo or from other religions that exist. Before I move on, closing.
Yeah, I think there are geographic incentives to war. That's why Russia is.
Yeah, okay, but I've dealt with this, right? I don't say like war disappears, right? I just said you reduce the extent of violence, which is still a lot of violence. And so far as religions are less protectionist, they're less likely to become overly conservative in order to fearmonger people into believing, like, look at the liberalism stealing all our ideas, or look at atheists stealing all our ideas, right? The reason that's important is because if religions inherently don't operate the way they do in the status quo, and on our side of the house they're likely to be more amenable to change because they're less afraid of backlash that would occur. Third, religions just generally don't want factionalism. And so far as they have an incentive to listen to dissent, they're likely to prevent that. Fourth, major religions are likely to have structure. Like, the reason it's easier to influence the Catholic Church is because you have ability to vote in certain leaders. You have ability to actually discuss with them and determine how you want to reform Catholicism for the best. But lastly, and the last argument within itself, why does this allow for self-actualization? Notice that a lot of people have life crises around religion, whether you believe in a religion, whether a religion exists, whether you are dying living your life in the best way. This leads you just have a massive impact of just having a life crisis and whether your beliefs are the right ones. I think crucially, you're able to engage with the fact that the religion you're following is the best and right one, and you have more of an ability to reach heaven. More people can reach heaven. God for everybody. Proud to propose.
I'd like to thank that speaker for that speech and invite the Leader of Opposition.
Okay, what's everyone supposed to do at the front?
There's a little microphone.
This?
I think so.
Let's put the new business? Yeah.
some things exist in religion, and then secondly, looking at why does that work for us. Okay, on the characterization then. Right. We think that first of all, there are probably, even though there are probably, even though everyone believes in God, right, there are probably separate conceptions of what God is actively like in some ways, right? So everyone may agree that God exists in some capacity, but that does not necessarily mean that everyone agrees on the things that God is likely to value in terms of morality, right? So we think this all means that we don't necessarily agree on what God thinks of every single different thing. Note that there are very little clear teachings. So insofar as in the current world origin is, we have religious books, and these can be interpreted in different ways, right? This is probably so likely the case. So people are able to interpret different allegories from different books in different ways. This probably just looks very similar to the Abrahamic religions all believe in the same God, right? But Muslims, Christians, and Jews all have slightly different interpretations of what that God looks like and how best to live their life within the first place. And this is probably the likely conception of what this looks like. The second thing to note here is I think there's probably just regional differences on things. And so far as the way that you conceive of God and morality is probably determined off of what your life has been like so far, so different cultures that you go in and everything. It's probably also just as far as there's probably some different interpretation as to what God values, how best live their life. What this means is I don't think open government and really government in general is able to access the same level is able to say at any level to the change of conflict. Because there are some groups that are still going to fight. Okay, why do you think that there's religious conflict on the both sides of the house, and therefore why is religious conflict better than on our side of the house? First of all, I think on God's side, religious conflict is just far, far better. Because every single individual in the world is religious in some capacity. We all believe in God. I think on our side of the house, there's a lot of people that just aren't religious, right? The majority of people in our world currently don't believe in God, or not the majority, but quite a lot of people, this is an increasing trend. And at that point, we're going to have less people that are willing to get involved in conflict in the first place. I think on scale, when everyone believes in God, the wars become far, far better because everyone has some best interest in it. Everyone wants to get involved, right? It probably means that all the harms of war, more death, more suffering, are exacerbated under government side of the house because there are just more people involved in it. It's on a far better scale. But secondly, and really important, I think twisting the teachings of God and religion and the history and believing in a different deity are two different things. And I think twisting teachings evokes a much more visceral reaction in individuals, right? Because I think when Christians look at, for example, Buddhists and think, well, they just believe in a different God, right? They're probably wrong. I don't think that they're right. I don't necessarily care about them. You probably just look down on them as a religion, right? If they're just wrong, thank you. Well, you don't necessarily see them as an affront to your religion because you believe in totally different teachings, totally different ideas. The problem is, when you all believe in the same God, right, we think people are far more likely to get angry to him because you feel that it's a personal affront to your beliefs, your way of life, all of your ideas, rather than twisting religious ideas. I think at that point, people engage in warfare far, far more, but are also far more likely to do so in a bad way, with far more harmful to individuals, because they have this intrinsic belief that this is an affront to their personal self. I think therefore, religious conflict exists on both sides of the house, and it's significantly worse on their side. Okay, why then, second point then, why then is it likely to be, why is it more coercive under our side of the house, right? Because every individual has to follow that religion here. So we think that knowing that God, knowing God exists means that things are far more coercive, right? Because religions don't need to justify their existence in the first place, right? They don't need to tell you why God is living like this, why you should believe in religion, why you should become an atheist, right? It's just a case that no one's able to ever critique this in the first place, right? I think the obvious response is religion is already coercive, right? Okay, so the difference here, the comparative, is that people know that there are alternatives under our side of the house, right? So people may go up religious, but at some point when they're maybe in their early teens, they discover that there are lots of people in the world that aren't religious, and then maybe find out about those viewpoints. They discover that there is an alternative to the world that they grew up in, and therefore you can choose whichever whether or not to be religious and opt into a religion or not opt into a religion. Thank you. So I think at that point we just allow people greater levels of agency under our side of the house because there are alternatives to people as opposed to just in coercion to religion. Why is coercion last? A couple of things there. First of all, I think it is to deprive people of agency, right? Not that the religion and the way and believing in God dictates the way that you live your life. No, thank you. It dictates what you want to find morality in, what the everyday activities you do, what types of food you eat, when you pray, how often you pray. All these things are limiting factors on your life and determine the way that you live your life. But also they dictate what you think about the future, right? So they dictate that, as Elishba said, if you believe in hell, you believe that you might end up in eternal suffering for the rest of your life. This is a really fucking terrifying concept, right? If you mess up in life, then you're going to end up in hell for the rest of eternity. I think people should be able to opt out of these scary ideas should be able to opt out of having to live their lives in dictated ways by just being able to see that there is an alternative. I think we provide an alternative for individuals, and they can make the value judgment about whether or not they want to live their life in accordance to religion and find value in it, and if you, or like seek some level of alternative.
So you can't just say there are going to be other sects, Muslims and Christians, and then say there is no choice to choose which sect you have. You are incredibly inconsistent.
No, okay, so the whole thing here, you can choose like what sect you believe in, right? But you're still religious, right? You're still believing in God. So you might believe in a different interpretation of the text, but you are still believing in God. You should just be able to believe that there is no God and be able to live your life in that way, not be dictated by any sort of religious figure whatsoever, right? I think that just means your life is like better and you're able to live your life in a way that's more fulfilling to you. Second, like using coercion side, you think it's far easier for religion to be abusive under our side of the house. Religion is completely unchecked, right? So there's no one to ever stand up and be like, hey, why are you doing this in the first place? This means religions can just get away with whatever the fuck they want. And Christians just can't opt out of that religion if that religion is doing bad things to them. They are stuck within it. They can opt into the sect. They can't opt out of religion and within a contract in its entirety. We think this means religions have the capacity to be more abusive, but also realize that in being abusive, there is no consequences to them. They can do whatever the fuck they want, and no one can really need them in the end. The third and final reason here is I just think that less people genuinely believe in God, right? Because if you're not opted into it and not being able to weigh up the balances here, you probably just have less of a true belief in God. Because the thing here is I think we're religious people against every single odd in the world, against all the arguments against religion, buying into religion and believing it, it's because they truly believe in God. You have a really personal connection. And at that point, I think your belief in God is just far stronger when you know there are alternatives and yet you're still silent with religion. I think your belief in God is far stronger when you access the benefits of religion more for these reasons. These reasons as a whole.
I'd like to thank that speaker for that speech and invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case for OG.
Where's the little thing?
It's like outside. It's like on the lap. Yeah, just like that.
Hello. Is that good?
No.
Hello. Is that
Speak up, you'll be fine.
okay? Open opposition don't like reading emotions. I think the reason religion operates in a detrimental manner in the status quo is because they are reactive to other religions, and crucially they want to maintain control. At the point at which another religion is more distant from me, i.e. I relate to the people of the other religion less, there's far less of me for me to have an incentive to sympathize with them, try and cooperate with them. I think when you like the other, i.e. they believe in a different God, I'm far more likely to hate them and try to want to take control off of them rather than if they are a sect within my religion. I think the issue with the open opposition is that they don't engage with how religion is now a single entity within our side of the house. Right. So let's deal with this sort of this sort of attempt from open opposition, sort of mechanism bash and try and change what the definition of the debate is. They say sectarianism still exists and this is bad. Right. Cool. This is not the model. Right. Alishba tells you that the religion which is united is something which has the same key features, i.e. a key feature of religion looks like the way you pray, the festivals you have, like the celebrations you have. I think that is a key feature because if that didn't exist, say for example, for Islam, then Islam wouldn't exist as the original religion that exists and that takes under the status quo, right? So that's clearly a key feature because it is a tenet of the religion. A commandment is a tenet of a religion, right? Notice, that means that anything that they say about historically about how Christianity and Islam going to war falls onto their side of the house just doesn't apply because there are different religions with different key features, so obviously that would exist on our side of the house. No point. Secondly, they talk about how like sectarianism is bad and that will still cause conflict. I think the point here is that like it's just going to be far less bad on our side of the house. Why? One, I think religions tend to go so far, like sects and religions try to like go in conflict with each other, but like primarily because of like the lack of resources and things like this. This is crucial, right? Because at the point at which there is one religion, and this means that there is one central agency which requires pure resources. So, for example, the church requires pure resources and tries to take like pure resources off of like another centralized religion under the status quo. But at the point at which there is one church, and they can get far more resources which they can produce into the state. This means that sects have to fight less hard to be able to sustain their populations of people, because now they just have more money, more funding, and resources. They can feed their sort of communities. They have to spend less money to feed their communities because they have more access to resources. They're not fighting against other religions. This means that sectarian violence tends to be less bad. But I think secondly, at the point at which at the point at which it's true that like religions promote things such as charity, this means that more charity exists on our side of the house because there's like more religion which exists. Which just means that more people are taking away from the rich and giving to the poor, which obviously means that there's far more equality on our side of the house, right? We can notice the core tenets of the religions that we're talking about. Like the primary basis of those is to be nice first and foremost, right? To love your neighbour, etc. To give to charity. These are rules that are like mandated by religion. I think everybody has to abide by that. That's clearly something which is good. Cool. I think the third thing that opening opposition say is that like religions do this to sort of like maintain control, and they do it to like because they actually care if you are like there are different sects, but they don't care if it's a different religion. I think I respond to this in the intro quite well, if I do say so myself. But like obviously it's true that like if I believe in the same God as somebody else, then there's far more for me to bond with that person over. There's far more for me to sympathize over. It means I can discuss the sorts of like habits and things and like prayers that I've been doing. For example, what celebrations and festivals are coming up in the future, and I can relate with that person more, which means I'm much less likely to want to hate him. But notice this acts on a macro scale as well, because you feel more similar to someone else. I think this is something which obviously is going to reduce tensions. Cool. They talk about how religious conflict is better on their side of the house because there are fewer religions. Like in general. I think this is just like not really debate, right? Because in the past it's probably true that almost every single person who existed in society was religious, right? So like huge communities of people, like entire countries had to be religious because of the rule of law. But notice there were different religions. Therefore then saying in the past there were lots of atheists and therefore there was less war isn't comparative because that's not what happened on their side of the house. I think therefore it's just true that like working in the past doesn't really matter. But we can way higher on this, right? Because if we tell you that fewer wars happened in the past, this is much more impactful than fewer wars happening in the future. Because obviously the wars that happened in the past were much more bloody, violent. There wasn't the Geneva Convention, etc. There weren't regulations in journalists, etc. There's tons more torture and horrific things that happened. But secondly, it just happened on a far wider scale. Like communities were going to war with each other all the time. Countries were going to war with each other all the time. This is obviously a huge scale impact, which we think we just reduce on our side of the house. I think obviously this weighs over. Secondly, they talk about like people care if they I've already told you. Cool. The last thing that they do, and this is sort of like there's substantive response, I think I've read all the case already, is they say that like basically people are coerced into religion in the first place. I think this is like falls into the biggest trap of not reading the motion or the info slide, because the info slide says that God exists. Right? At the point at which it's true that God exists, then obviously it's correct for people, it's correct to enforce people into following the religion and buying into the religion. Why? There's a humongous amount of weight here. Because at the point at which it's true that heaven or hell exists, then we think it's completely legitimate to coerce people into going into buying into this religion. Because obviously hell or heaven are like the utmost important things in people's lives, because they last for eternity. So burning in hell lasts for eternity, and going to heaven lasts for eternity. But one is infinitely good, and one is infinitely bad. Therefore, if we coerce people into doing this is completely fine. What's the interest in this? If I see somebody drowning in the river, then I'm not going to be like, hey, do you want me to come and save you, maybe? Right? And get your consent for it, and not coerce them, because obviously that would take them over their agency, right? I would run in, jump in, save them, even if they didn't necessarily want to be saved, because obviously I know that's something which is good to live by. I think opening government or opening opposition have to stand by this institution and tell us why this is something which is likely to happen. But notice this is something which also weighs over every other team in the debate. Because if we can prove that there's infinite benefits to coercing people into the same religion, then this is true. But let's look at the comparison. Because on the comparison, we don't actually know if God exists, right? So they can stand up and say, God might exist on our side of the house, therefore we might be able to co-opt your benefits. But notice this is a risk, right? You cannot actually tell if this is true or not. Whereas on the comparison, you can tell that there is a guaranteed chance of people being able to access this eternal benefit of like heaven. So obviously this weighs far higher than on the government side. But also on their side of the house, they have to choose between religions, which causes a lot of internal conflict between people. Because I cannot tell if the Hindu religion or the Islamic religion is something in which the God is actually true, so that means that that's likely to cause some pain and suffering within people. Thanks.
I'd like to thank that speaker for that speech and invite the Deputy Leader of Ops to conclude the case for 400 and top half.
The front of me, is it working?
Yes.
Okay. Is that fine? Cool. Starting with one. So I'm going to talk about religious violence, and I'm going to talk about coercion. That's probably surprising. I think Tom and Alishba are probably right that religion has been the instigator of much conflict around the world. I think they're definitely wrong that this is a world where that conflict doesn't happen. Notice the example that we use is violence between Christians and Muslims in Nigeria, which is critically a really bad example for their side, because most Abrahamic religions actually believe in the same God, as would be the case in this notion. They differ in terms of their interpretations of that cultural values. You might try to say religions share a common conception of the fact that there's one true God, or the fact that there are prophets and scriptures. This is not the same as sharing a uniform interpretation of who those prophets were, and what their teachings mean, and of what the scriptures actually allude to. So Catholics and Protestants believe in the same God, they believe in Jesus, they believe that the Bible is the scripture, but they disagree entirely about how the ideas of the Bible or how the teachings of Jesus should be interpreted, and how individuals should live their life as a consequence. This is why, even within the same religions, there are so many different interpretations, particularly because these texts often tend to be highly allegorical and open to interpretation. Like, the Bible is basically a collection of intuition pumps, and different sets of religions read those intuition pumps differently depending on basically what their cultural values are, right? It's like a Confucian reading of the Bible is probably pretty different to a reading of the Bible that's inspired by Enlightenment philosophy, for example, which is why religions change over time, and it's why religions diverge in terms of having different sects, despite having the same metaphysical belief in the same type of God, the nature of God being the same for both of them. I think it's very likely there are different interpretations of religious belief for a number of reasons. The first is just that they're allegorical. The second is that regional cultural values do just influence readings of religions, right? Like, we're talking about people who live in different parts of the world, given this is presumably something that is global. These are different parts of the world that have different economic circumstances, they have different political histories, they have different philosophy, art, and culture. For those reasons, I think all of these feed into different interpretations of what is actually valuable, and your different interpretations of what you think probably is morally right shape what you think that God says is morally right. The third is just like, actors probably have perverse incentives, including wanting to control their populations and draw divisions in order to like stoke up tensions that allow you to essentially rise up as a leader. And often just because you know that God exists doesn't mean that you're necessarily scared of going to hell or think you'll necessarily punish the things that you're doing. See the way that, for example, the Catholic Church hugely exploited people for hundreds of years by making them pay shitloads of money for confession, despite the fact that those priests presumably believe in hell and thought they could go to hell, they still did that anyway. So for all these reasons, I think there are very likely to be different interpretations of religious belief, and so people are still going to have different sects of religion, even if they live in a world of total belief. The implications of this. Firstly, when OG say everyone's going to go to heaven and this is really nice, sure, some people might, but given that everyone has different interpretations of what God thinks is right, and is therefore going to live their life in a different way, then presumably only some of those people are correct. So the only people who go to heaven are the ones who just so happen to be lucky that their conception of what God's moral code is actually the moral code that was correct. So a lot of people aren't going to go to heaven, so that impact is not one they can win the debate on. Second, on charity. Again, we've shown why there are different interpretations anyway, so not necessarily all interpretations are going to say that it's charitable. Also, as an extremist response here, like, most religions probably do support charity. If it is true, as they say, everyone historically was religious, I don't think this is that different on either side of the house, but also most moral philosophy, even for people who aren't religious, says you ought to be generous, you ought to be giving money to charity, because you should be a utilitarian. Therefore, I think people are still giving to charity significantly anyway, so I don't think this is a significant benefit for them in the round. But the third and most significant thing here is just on war, right? Like, this is still very likely to happen. And in particular, I think it's likely to be much more vitriolic on a much larger scale than it would have been on the world that we currently live in. And shock horror, these are also wars that happened in the past. This weird way about why the past is more important doesn't matter because it applies to our case too. The reason is, first, everyone just believes in God, right? So yeah, you can have a conflict between two smallish groups of people who believe in particular conceptions of religion. Now blow that up and think about it in terms of the scale of the entire world. Like, there's just a lot more people to be involved in the conflicts in the first place. Second, everyone who presumably loves their God and loves their interpretation of that God's text is presumably also really angry when other sects are essentially bastardizing their holy text or bastardizing what their holy prophets have said and disagree with them on those types of issues. Which is also why things like the conflict between, say, Christians and Jews or Christians and Muslims is often particularly intense in a way that it doesn't tend to be between, say, Christians and Hindus. And look, I want to be clear, the comparison is not that there's no religious conflict, because obviously we live in a world where religious conflict has historically happened, it does exist. The difference is the scale of that conflict. As well as that, I do also think that probably Christians look down on people who are Hindu or who believe in polytheistic religions, but often I think there's less vitriol in those interactions and it's much more condescending because you think that these silly people just believe something else. But the difference is, you think that these people have actually twisted the words of your God, that this God actually exists and that they have chosen to actively defy him. And I think that is the force thing, the anger that galvanizes people to go into conflict on a much a more angry level that causes them to prolong those conflicts and fight in much more intense ways, which is why all the harms we talk about happens. But third, as Tom tells us, these groups have more resources because more people believe in those religions and more people denounce them. So when people have more resources and are going to war, they presumably have more resources with which to do that war, which is obviously also going to be bad, right? And is going to lead to further conflict. I'll take those.
Okay, so in the absence of religion, people have turned more to politics, which is why you get fascist economies. So instead of having a religious war, you now have communists fighting capitalists.
Yeah, that's fine. We don't live in a world with an absence of religion. Next, coercion. I want to go in particular with what closing say here in their POI to Zainab, which is like, oh, well, there are still other sects, so it's not coercive, because you still choose between the sects. Like, we've already told here why you're likely incredibly vitriolic and maybe treat people who have other interpretations of the same religion, and also why these religious views are likely to be pretty culturally specific and thus geographically concentrated. I therefore think it is very unlikely that other sects actually exist in your area, because it's very likely that they've been driven out or just geographically don't exist in any way that is close to. And in particular, this is a preferred space. We're imagining a world where this has always existed and was always the case, meaning we have to think about all of history. Yes, today society might be quite pluralistic, it might be quite multicultural. This just wasn't the case for the hundreds, if not thousands of years before our current moment. That people lived in communities where they weren't exposed to exchange of ideas because they just couldn't leave the towns that they were born in, and where they were never able to access any significant degree of education or immigration or cultural exchange. Therefore, the thing that these people always had in the past, they always had a choice as to whether or not they wanted to opt into that set of religious beliefs. They were always able to choose whether or not the interpretation that was being forced on them was an interpretation that was right for them, whether they wanted to have their identity shaped by that interpretation, whether they wanted to have what they valued about the world shaped by it, whether they wanted to have their metaphysical beliefs about the nature of existence shaped by that interpretation. They could always say no, they could always not listen to church, they could always never choose to allow that religion to be one that shapes them. The comparative is, they know that God exists, this is their only option, and they are coerced into those beliefs. But there's no reason why those beliefs are correct, and you believe everything we've said about different interpretations. For those reasons, the very right to oppose.
I'd like to thank that speaker for that speech and everyone in top half, and now on the member of government to start the case with CG.
when Nietzsche said that God was dead, he has made assholes who are egotistical, are immoral, and not think about other people. This is the very simple case when it comes to government. The more religious you are, the more you're going to think about how you're going to act, which means you make more moral decisions directly going with opening opposition. I think opening up is kind of out of the way, because I think it's fair to say sex exists, and just saying that, priests exist doesn't mean that it is something that is everybody's going to agree with, or tries to scroll from this motion. Then we're basically going to say, why are you going to overall going to act more moral? Why are you going to think more about your acts? Two specific reasons. One, know that you don't believe that God actually exists and is all-knowing, so you know always what you're going to be doing, and never also completely judging you. Therefore, you're going to have at least some perception that there might be some heaven or hell, and therefore you're going to say like, it's going to be likely that I need to do these things because God will know this. But secondly, I also want to know that you just know that there is an objective good, right? Because God exists and you think that He is all-knowing and all-powerful, because that's what really is the same within the monotheistic beliefs. Therefore, you believe that there is this abstract perception of what it means to be good, and you try to work towards it because you now have this objective certainty. So why are the acts actually going to be good? Know that inherently in religion there is going to be a unifying principle. Know that everybody knows God, and to a certain extent there's going to be a lot of shortcomings there, but also just everyone was made in the conception of God. One of the key features is that God has created the universe, has created life, but also all the monotheistic beliefs that the people who were created in the image of God. That we share some commonality with God, either in the way we look, in the way we think, and all those kinds of things. But also we want to note that this is just something that oftentimes priests just found and make people believe. So even if it's not necessarily true, we think it's going to be likely, it's going to be part of the religion, because people just want to feel like connected to this one really big abstract thing that they know exists, but now it's going to be like that. It gives them significantly more comfort. Secondly, also note there's this idea of benevolence. But benevolence exists because there is a power asymmetry. God is good because He is powerful and is able to help us and does help us. That is what makes Him to be a good individual. That means that individuals are going to abstract this to say, we are also actually quite good, we also want to act good, but we have power, therefore we need to help the poor. This is actually making the point about charity, which OG just asserts exists. Here's a structural reason why that happens. Third one, I also want to know, God exists, and everybody in monotheistic beliefs oftentimes believe that they're going to actually interact with the world. That is to say, all scriptures have God intervening when something really bad happens. So what happens if you have now pedophiles in the Catholic Church? God is going to intervene and say, no, this is a bad thing, or is going to send a prophet which is going to have a high certainty that they're actually going to be believed. That is to say, you're going to protect these people from doing these immoral things, but you also want to know the general thing, right? At the moment God exists, and He's benevolent, and also they're most likely going to be looking like us and create us because they like us and all that stuff. They're also going to protect us from the worst harms. Things such as extinction, things such as climate change. It's very unlikely there's now going to be a meteor who's going to kill humans, but we don't have that certainty for people when in this world, therefore. So, how do you then do this with opening opposition? You can say, you're going to have sex and then you hate it, and now you have the opposition choice. If you're atheist, you don't choose to become religious, right? You cannot become really religious because faith is something that you just intrinsically believe and there's no logical reasoning behind it. There's no just campus where I'm like, I'm atheist. You know what, now I'm going to be Christian and now I must actually believe this. Better, atheism is just another form of faith that is forced upon you. But I also want to note that they run their own case, right? Because it's fair to say that the only reason you have to become multicultural and accepted, which means that the delta in this debate is most likely not going to be in history, but they're going to be done, at best for them, going to be new. Because again, they're going to be with different cultures. You still want to have, the same community that you are, the small group. They are very different from you, so they're very scary. So everything in history still makes you want to hate them, or at least fear them, and therefore be mean to them. The thing that then happens is the best case scenario for them then happens when you're going to be, in the short term. But in the short term it also doesn't work, right? Because why do people have fucked with politics? People have fucked with politics because they want this form of meaning, a specific goal that's burning towards, and a story that explains to them why things are happening. This is such as materialism and the class struggle where we need to fight. And they also have similarities, right? They have the martyrs, right? The moment somebody dies for their cause, they're glorifying it. As we saw with the IRA glorifying people who died for their specific political opinion. Which is like in the absence of religion, as they are stating, people will flock for other forms of certainty, which is going to be still going to be extinguished because they're going to be in a bubble where they're still going to want the story and you still want the certainty and they're willing to die. Therefore, opening opposition is going to be unlikely. But know that I structurally explained to you why people are going to act more morally because of the inherent principle of religion are going to make you at least care about these other individuals. So, now impact on weight. I want to note that this is just a kind of low barrier case, right? You just need to think a bit more about your actions, which means you take other people's emotions into more consideration, which means you're going to act nicer. Panel is not that hard. What does that mean? This means that there's going to be a big impact, because one, over history, you're much more likely to now have a lot of people acting in this specific way. But secondly, I want to note, oftentimes this is also something where we're going to have big impact, right? We think this is going to trickle down. At the moment that we believe that benevolence means that you're going to use power asymmetry to do this well, this basically means that you are not going to set up these structures which are going to be helping poor people in a structured way, trying to see them and trying to help them and understand them. Because a part of this also is that you're going to show a specific way in which you're able to help these individuals. You're going to show the good way of life and all those kinds of things. But why do all these things actually still be impactful? One, I think people just oftentimes get sad when they feel they're not being heard or the individual hurt their emotions. You think at the moment you're not going to at least consider it, you're less likely to make accidentally a bad comment, but also much more likely you're going to be at least willing to talk it out. That's to say you don't want this animosity, you don't want this animosity because it might be that's going to be illegitimate, or you just want to make sure that you're all on the same page, morally and all those kinds of things. You never think you're going to create this form of certainty if there's still bureaucracy closing, opening.
So, if what your opening says is true about people always being religious throughout history, can you actually give us the name of a religion where charity is not a core value?
So this is kind of like my point, right? If it's a core value, then that basically means that it's part of monotheism, which then means that our charity might get bigger. It's going to be much more likely the moment you're going to have politics, it's going to be an important part of you. You might not even care about it, right? You're going to be like, oh, the poor just need to pull themselves all the bootstraps because neoliberalism is a good idea. Or actually, maybe we should also kill other individuals because they are the ones who are going to be in power, and we just want to kill them and then rise up to the proletariat. So what do I have proven in this way? I think of all we still prove to be big impact because it influences everybody on a daily basis. Everybody's going to be nice now, and everybody's going to have a big impact. But I also want to note we just have a lot more secure impact. We should say it's very unlikely or to know how history would develop with wars and all this kind of stuff because people are going to hate each other anyway because it's going to be different. This is significantly more secure impact. But I also want to note, right, we uniquely at this point about the fact that God cannot intervene, right? God cannot make sure that the actions we're going to do are going to do it. Again, God has this incentive because they are benevolent, they want the best thing. So sure, maybe some bad things might happen, and to a certain extent we're willing to do it, but the worst of the worst are unlikely to happen because they want something good for us. But also one note, you just create a specific form of certainty for these individuals, that they know that they're going to be acting good, that they're going to actually help people and give all this happiness. For all those reasons, it's close to government.
I'd like to thank that speaker for that speech and invite the member of opposition to start the case for CO.
I really don't think I knew this one really well. Is that absolutely Certainty fosters apathy and makes existence turn into eternal suffering. Also, heaven literally sucks balls. Please do not send this video to my really Catholic grandmother, she will disown me. Okay, so on to the first quote that you're going to get from CO today. Why did the development of humanity under this type of world literally lead to a standstill in the most unprogressive, just frankly boring way? Right, so just note that oftentimes throughout all of existence, fear is the exact incentive which drives us to create progress. Even though it's incredibly boring for me as a caveman to go out and hunt for rocks and stuff, it's the fear that I'll die in the cold that makes me be like, oh shit, I really don't want to do this thing, but I'm gonna do this thing because I'm really scared that I'm going to die, right? That is why cavemen progressed, learned, oh, if I bang the rocks together, because I'm scared that if I don't, I'll die. Oh, now we have fire. Cool, that's progress, guys, right? It's the fear of climate change. We're not all benevolent people who are like, oh, I want to stop climate change because we shouldn't destroy the planet. We stop climate change because we act on it because we're scared of what happens if we don't. We're scared that we all just die and the world blows up, right? We look for solutions when we have fear. Even religious people in a world where religion even religious people in our current world where religion still exists, they're still challenged constantly and presented with doubt, right? They have the fear that maybe God isn't real. Even though I do believe in God, I still personally as a religious person have the fear that maybe God isn't real. Maybe his plan doesn't exist. Maybe I will just do good things to try and make my life and other people's life better, because if I really fuck up, maybe I just do go to hell, right? Even if I don't think that heaven is certain, I still try and create heaven on earth, right? If I think that heaven is certain, if I think that heaven's uncertain, that's the word, I still now try to create heaven on earth. This means that my incentives and my drive for progress and benefits are completely removed when nobody ever questions the fact that God save us from everything? What are the impacts of this? I think there's less incentive to pursue things like scientific progress. There's less incentive to individually pursue good life when I think it's fine, whatever happens on earth just exists. I'll just go to heaven anyways. There's less incentive to help other people when I see them always suffering and struggling to think, fuck it, it's just God's plan, right? He'll save them in the end. I think this just does not happen in the status quo, even when you are religious, because religious people still have that level of uncertainty when everyone around them is questioning them and constantly being like, God isn't real, or are you sure about heaven, are you sure about this at all? When you have that certainty, when you have that uncertainty, you have that doubt, you still use that fear to drive you to progress, to drive you to be a better person, to drive you to make your world and the world for everybody else just a little bit better. So that's that. I'll take a few items.
Yeah, people still fear hell and want to attain heaven. The mechanisms that you talk about are completely symmetric.
They're absolutely not, right? Even if I fear hell, I still know that there's a possibility that I don't go to heaven as well. If everybody believes in heaven, then I think that everyone just thinks that everything's going to be good. But anyways, I actually will get onto this specifically now. So first of all, heaven also obviously has negative utility, but I think the actual push you're getting from the CEO today is that heaven is also just as fucking bad, if not worse. So why does everybody, or at least most people, or at least most than whatever happens on God's side, go to heaven against comparative, right? And why is it still an incredibly large negative one? So why do more people go to heaven under this world? First, every single monotheistic religion has an afterlife. So I think this still very much clearly exists within whichever conception most that you want to do. Like, I don't know what to talk about fight word, but I think heaven still definitely exists. Because like religions do this as a mechanism for buying. It's like, if you believe in this, we'll get you to heaven. If you don't, you'll go to hell. I think that core tenet still remains. Secondly, every single monotheistic religion uses the core tenet of belief in the religion being your ticket into heaven. But I think that there's still some other ways to do this, right? Because some religions say that it's belief plus your good works that get you to heaven. Some say it's just your belief. As long as you just believe in God, then you will get into heaven. And that if you have good works, that will be like a stem of your belief or whatever, right? But belief is always a very core tenet. That means if you believe, you go into heaven. This is literally what so many religions fight about. But whether or not you believe in good works or no good works being relevant, faith is still the one thing that always remains at the end. So I think then that throughout all of this religious discourse, belief is the only constant factor that always determines whether or not you do go to heaven. So I think that we can deduce that if you believe, which everybody in this world does, then you will go to heaven. So why do more people believe in God in this world? I mean, sure, I didn't cop on the emotion does just say this, but some analysis behind this as well. The analysis behind it is just that your surroundings insulate your ideology, right? We want to, of course, as human beings, think that we are incredibly independent, smart, capable thinkers, blah, 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 blah. No. I think that I'm really smart and independent, all that stuff. When I went to an incredibly, racist, Republican, white school in North Carolina, I was like, maybe they have a point. Maybe my, racist kind of shit. I don't know, guys. Maybe brown people do this kind of stuff. Because my surroundings have insulated me so much, and they have affected me so much. It is so much easier to go with your environment because of your survival mechanisms that are literally, biologically imperative to how human beings are created in the first place, right? Even when people challenge you in the status quo, they do think that you can still think you can grow up in a really, really horrible environment and still challenge it, but that's usually the case because there's at least someone else out there that lets you escape and actually I agree with you. Maybe brown people are cool, right? When I came to Glasgow, I was like, oh shit, there are other ideologies, and then I was able to change my mind. When every single person is so insulated in one belief, as in everyone in the world believes that there is a God, I have been also completely forced into that belief. There is no existence of someone else to side with or someone else to help me escape from my ridiculous beliefs. Right. So I think that everyone then believes in God, and I think it means that more people go to heaven when they die. Why is heaven the worst possible outcome? Why does the impact outweigh every other single thing in this debate on irreversibility, intensity, and just far more negative principal damage in terms of coercion than Olden complaint? Heaven is infinite pleasure, right? And the removal of flaw. One, humans evaluate life in relative terms. I might have enough food, water, and shelter to be happy. But when I now have a mansion, and then my standard for what housing should be and how much happiness I derive from housing is always going to increase. Basically, this is the hedonistic temple, but I feel like saying that's really pretentious, so yeah, I'm just going to explain it instead, right? I keep seeking pleasure because I know that I can get more and more and more of it. I, as a junior debater, have a certain tendency for a certain horse tranquilizer, right? So when I take a bump of this certain horse tranquilizer, I'm like, wow, this is fucking incredible, I love it. However, the next time, if I take the same amount, I'm like, my high last time was really it's not as great. Because my standard for how much I can take goes up. Then I take 2 bumps, and I'm like, that's great. Then I do 2 again, I'm like, not great enough. So I try to take 3 and 4. What happens when I max out on my cat? I overdose and I die. What happens when you max out on pleasure? You theoretically die as well. I think that existence then becomes meaningless in heaven. You can never escape it. When heaven is the maximum pleasure you have, and everyone under this world is now condemned to infinite existence in heaven, I think that basically takes away all meaning of life, and every single a form of, I don't know, just enjoyment people have. When you have maxed out on pleasure, there's nothing more to drive for. It is biologically fundamental to human beings to continually want to drive for more and more and more. Even if we know it's going to make us out, even if I know that more cat is not good for me, I just know that I want more because I've tasted what it's like to have 2 bucks and now I want 3. We literally prove to you that we take away the meaning of life on government side of the house. It is clearly a CEO win.
I'd like to thank our speaker for that speech and invite the government whip to complete the case for the closing guard. You should. Maybe not on your collar, because this is quite high up. A little lower.
Yeah, I'm just going to do it.
Can you not clip it to
Yeah. Can you go down? Great. Camera, as much as I love the drug example, it makes no sense because it's based on the body and how the body reacts biologically to pleasure, and it's based on economic theory. The problem is, we're talking about how your soul feels or doesn't feel satisfied in heaven. Heaven as a concept has no limit to the amount of pleasure you can derive from, to the amount of goodness that you can have out of that. That means that automatically, all the content on CO is not really viable in this debate because as a concept, if it universally is true that heaven exists, it's constantly and always universally pleasurable for individuals to be in that state because it's their soul that is in that state and gets there, not their body that at some point maxes out with the amount of happiness it can get from it. Then let's deal with other points that they bring up. They say, oh, well, if God is always there to save you as like a safety blanket or a safety jacket, then people will never have scientific problems. A couple of responses to this. I think, one, you will wait. You will wait. You will wait. That's the best case of there. Right? At some point, either biological urges that you have, for instance, I need to go out and get food because I'm starving and I kind of feel really bad, which we're programmed biologically to prioritize no matter what ideology we have, no matter what we think, right? Just we feel the need to get food, so we go out there and hunt. Those will probably kick in at some point. But also, especially because we live in societies, because we're social creatures, usually there's going to be other people that even though they know God exists, will tend to say, well, maybe he's saving his energy to intervene at some other point. Let's do something now. Let's act together now. Moreover, as time progresses, probably these individuals, because there's different types of scriptures and ways to interpret it, can then say, God wants us to go through this alone so that we can grow as individuals, so that we can realize how to face our fears, how to be able to get out of our cave, and how to do other things for others, right? And no, Pjotr talks to you about how individuals then have incentives related to how to act better towards others because they feel that them having a sort of power asymmetry over others is what gives them a moral imperative to be benevolent towards others. That is to say, if you at some point have the capacity to do something nice for somebody else, you should because it is how God acts and you know that God is there, God is watching, and God has the utmost moral truth of how people in general should behave because he's all-knowing and he still chooses to be benevolent, right? That means that because Pjotr proves to you that there's an incentive that individuals have to also act nice toward others, you're likely at some point to think, well, it would be nice if we would progress as a nice, tribal village, and I could make it easier for my fellow people, cavemen, to feel not cold. So what if we try to invent something that will keep us warm? What if we create a code for ourselves? What if we create at some point maybe fire? Worst case, we live in a tribal society. If it's nice people to each other, they don't kill each other because they like being nice, I don't necessarily see what it is absolutely desirable on their side. Not Pjotr's point. God will intervene if there is something fundamentally wrong with the world because he exists and because the info slide guarantees that he's benevolent. If he really believes people are suffering in their tribal states, he will come and give us technology and say, here is humans, get
out of your cave. Also, probably you believe that God will protect you in your endeavors, be them risky to try to get scientific progress, to try to, in the beginning, get out of your cave and hunt. Okay, that point is out. Let's deal then with OO. So OO talks about agency, and they say people are absolutely coerced, and that is terrible because, well, they have no opt-in, and they automatically believe in God irrespective of the sect. The idea is this. I don't know if people would prefer, absent of any other information, to be in religion in the first place or to not be in the religion in the first place. The only instance in which you find these things are post-factum. Post them being in a sect and then realizing maybe I don't really like behaving like this, maybe I would like to live my life in other ways. The crucial difference though is the following. On our side, you have the option that to be able to thoroughly, properly believe in this because you're certain that God exists. You cannot not have a crisis of faith in terms of whether or not this individual exists or not. No, thank you. On their side of the house, if you do have this crisis, you can no longer then believe, or you're never certain that God exists, so you can never certainly have the full extent of your belief and the benefits of that. Whereas you can opt out of sects and just individually follow your belief in God if you want to, right? Like you don't have to go to all of the sects, but you can just stay at home and pray every now and then. And no, they never prove why individuals would prefer to not be in religion in the first place. Most people like to be told this is what you should do with your life because they don't like the uncertainty of looking around and thinking, I have no idea how to guide my principles, I have no idea what to do with my life and what my purpose should be. Intuition panel, most of us look at friends, look at discussions with people, read philosophy books because we're unsure what we want to do with our life. We're unsure what we think we should be doing to consider ourselves good individuals. We guarantee that to individuals. We are happier, usually, when we find out, oh, I really think that I align with this political concept because we think it represents a way in which we would see life as fit and we would do good to this world. We have that already on the table, so I think it's likely that individuals would prefer that, and they're given that when they certainly believe there's a higher being, and this is the way in which you should behave like this higher being. Opening.
You can never be certain that your sex teachings are true. So obviously, given there's uncertainty on either side, the side that has two options has more choice than the side that has literally one.
No, because irrespective of whether or not you're certain that the sect's teaching are true, you're certain that God exists. And yours analysis is not based on what the sect tells you that God wants you to do. It's based on how you as an individual think God is all powerful, God is all knowing, the absolute truth that He chose is to be benevolent, and thus you choose to act in those things. So we're not going to give them interpretations of sects. Okay, then let's deal with other points. I want to just wash out clearly the point of conflict in opening half, because I think even though they try to flip it in yellow, opening opposition is inherently contradictory. In yellow, they say people have a weaker belief in God. In yellow, they say, oh no, actually, the twist, you think that the words of God are twisted and you're more angry. I'm not sure if people are more engaged or less engaged in religion, and what makes them engage more or less in conflict. Crucially then, what this means is they never prove there's more people that are willing to be radicalized and then go into conflict with other people. They never prove that there's more scale to the conflict that they're talking about. Panel, I think that Pjotr gives you sufficient counter-incentives where people are more likely, irrespective of the type of religion that they buy into, to still act better towards their fellow humans, right? And maybe we don't even reach the point where we create the bad weapons that they talk about because maybe we live in a happy tribal society. The point is, at that point, we don't have to care about these kinds of impacts because they're not certain, or if they are certain, they're not they're at best marginal. Compared to our opening as well, we are able to provide you something that happens much more frequently and with a much higher intensity because a lot of times people just help each other out, and that is a better world to live in. So let's have that.
I'd like to thank our speaker for that speech and invite the opposition whip to conclude the case for closing up and the debate.
Last night I looked up at the star in all... Oh, sorry, got my microphone. How do I put this in? Can't be so anything.
Finish the story.
Alright, microphone working?
Yeah.
Cool. Last night I looked up at the stars and was in awe for their beauty. Their small details, so numerous, scarce to be counted. Yet if I were to see them tomorrow, I would be slightly less impressed, knowing already what I had seen. Repeat this again and again, I would come to know the patterns, the brightness, until each detail would seem less exceptional, less distinct, until the stars were as dark as the night itself. This is fundamentally existence in heaven. It is suffering insofar as I am subject to constant hunger for more, which I eventually will not be able to be provided. CG responds that you'll just have your soul in heaven and that'll be happy forever. What is your soul if not your mind? What are the essential characteristics of your being if not the features of your mind that look for more, which have passions, interests, which experience pleasure? What is pleasure if not a specific biological response? I'm uncertain how we can exist without a mind. I'm certain why we value a soul at all. Note the intuition pump of just a dopamine receptor. This might be experienced in the same chemical process of happiness as human, but we don't consider it morally valuable. If a soul is mindless, then I don't know why we care about a soul at all. I think then, if this doesn't exist, then, well, essentially, people are simply being stripped of their humanity, which is perhaps even worse than fundamental torture. But that said, I think just in any Abrahamic interpretation of religion, a basic, like, facsimile of ourselves ends up in heaven. It is to some extent a representation of ourselves. And I want you to think about this, because it is fundamentally wired in humans to always seek for more. Even if we've hunted down one cow, another wouldn't hurt. We always desire more pleasure, yet once we reach its peak, it won't seem exceptional to us anymore, once we've experienced it for 1,000 years. Yet we will still hunger for more because we are fundamentally driven to do so, because it is a feature of most humans to be ambitious. Yet this never can be fulfilled. We are condemned to an eternity of dissatisfaction, an eternity of boredom, an eternity of hunger. This fundamentally is torture. Why does this matter in the debate? Pretty obvious. Infinite negative utility. Content warning, but I'm going to talk about some maths. First of all, irrespective of what happens in this debate, if we prove this, we way above every team in the debate. Because the fate of everyone, whether they died in war or in peace, is to suffer for the rest of their lives. It is to always hunger to more. Even if they try and pursue like higher pleasures, I don't know, you can only rewatch Seinfeld so many times before eternity becomes boring. These people are condemned to suffering no matter what. And we way above every team in this debate because of this. But even if this isn't the case, even if only hell is eternal suffering, this still should not be a world which we prefer. Note that infinity plus infinity is still infinity. So even if there's more people in heaven, we wouldn't kill someone to make another person happy, even if there's the same amount of pleasure and happiness, because unsuffering. Because fundamentally, it is wrong to prefer a world in which people are robbed of their autonomy for eternity, a world in which they are condemned to suffer for eternity. Fundamentally, even if only hell is suffering, it is deontologically wrong to prefer one infinity over another when one infinity forces us to choose an act of harm. But beyond that, I'm going to move into just thoroughly rebutting every team. We very clearly win both in the material and spiritual realm of this debate. Starting with closing opposition. What I would like to note about closing opposition is that humans are incredibly good at lying to themselves. I think we've all experienced this. To the extent these societies still do need to hunt, this is their rebuttal to us, they probably still do need to justify morally wrong actions insofar as this favours their interests. Note, however, the delta. When you have certainty in one existing thing, the most fundamental aspect of reality, the origin of the universe, I think scientific minds just become substantially as curious when they basically have all the answers already. People aren't pushed by fear of not knowing, because they know already. They stay complacent and stagnant. So even if they are able to avoid, I don't know, Soviet communism, they don't get the Enlightenment, so like infant mortality rates stays at 50% for the entirety of history. Why does evil CG want all these poor babies to die? Fundamentally then, I think, scientific progress probably matters more than conflict. Note that they say that, like, if things are bad, God will just intervene. I'm sorry, if this debate was just, things will be very good on our side of the house, it probably wouldn't be set as a motion. It is specifically stated in the info slide that God does not intervene, because the world does not very materially look different. To this extent, then, necessarily, CO does not stand in this debate, both in the regard that these ideas just aren't likely to be as influential as they state, insofar as people are more likely to prioritize their material needs first, and therefore rationalize these, but second of all, their cases of God intervening are just kind of silly. Okay, moving on to opening government. The rebuttal is similar but more nuanced because opening government is better too. So, fundamentally, the problem with opening government is that they misunderstand how religions form. Religions form to adapt to new social circumstances, i.e., religions that are most likely to spread are those that can gain the most new followers. The best way to gain followers is not going to war, because if I go to war with a county, they're going to be pissed off at my religion if the justification was religious. The reason religions engage in war is because it is a justification, but not a cause for these wars. I.e., if I'm in European society, the only way Christianity can survive and spread to, for instance, the power centers which depend on an active military sector is by allowing for war. However, the incentive structures for this war to happen exist anyway. This war is not beneficial to religion, it is not caused by religion, religion simply tolerates it to exist. Because fundamentally, medieval societies benefit from going to war. It is in their incentive structures. History is ultimately not a story of ideas, it is a story of incentives and evil. And fundamentally, there is no significant shift in open government. I will take your point.
Life loses meaning and agency if you don't know whether God exists and that destruction slowly. This is a much more intense impact than backup, as people will be nice on either side, and heaven is still better than hell or nothing.
No, it's likely not because you just die and you stop suffering. Let's be honest. We don't have any certainty that heaven exists. We have certainty that it does on your side of the house and that it is suffering. To this extent, then, we just have to weigh on whether or not we want to risk suffering forever compared to a peaceful death. Because even if I die, even if I live a painful life, I will be able to rest for eternity. Whilst on our side of the house, we will be tortured for eternity. But note again, even if we don't buy stuff on heaven, first of all, we just shouldn't fear hell because it is equally as bad as heaven. But second of all, we just win insofar as science saves more lives than their marginal shift in wars. Insofar as we prove a greater extent of the progress of humanity, we're able to save more lives through things like heating, through things like advancing our political structures, through things like, just generally making life less fundamentally miserable whilst we're living it. That leads us to win above our own. Again, I think the shift here in wars is relatively marginal, even if they probably win the clash of energy. Insofar as, even if there is this disparity, these wars probably have structural reasons behind them to happen otherwise. What does not have a structural reason to happen is scientific progress, as it is uniquely contingent on human curiosity. Therefore, in the material realm, we beat them insofar as we prove a greater shift in quality of life, insofar as this is contingent on, just progress. But second of all, we just have infinite negative utility, which we're able to avoid on our side, which basically just wins the debate insofar as this is just by far the largest impact that can be reached. Existing forever is suffering, because I will eventually be rid of the things that make life interesting and unique. Humans are not designed for eternity.
Cool. I'd like to thank that speaker for that speech and everyone again for what was a great final. It's been on the final call of the